You got my gears turning quite a bit there, Aaron. And, having listened to a number of the presentations earlier on, one of the factors we talked about in fostering entrepreneurship or just better outcomes in social and economic mobility is education.
Yeah.
What role do educators play in instilling this adventurous spirit in folks? And the reason I say that is when I heard you talk, I said my gears were spinning, and it's because we might have an education system or a public education system where you're rewarded for sitting in the chair and following the rules all day, and you're saying the people who are successful are the ones that kind of break the rules or push the limits. So how do we marry those two?
Here's what I'd say, and I think it's less about the K-12, but just our whole system of America today. How do you succeed in America today? You do this tedious resume building that allows you to get into an elite college. So I see the local newspaper for Carmel, and I pick it up, and here is a story about two high school students who've created a nonprofit to help middle school girls get interested in STEM. And I'm sure that's great, but I'm also like, these people want to get into Harvard. That's why they're doing that, and that's why it's in the paper. And they're doing all these things. They're checking all the boxes. You get into Harvard. Then you graduate from Harvard. You get your job at McKinsey. You get your job at Goldman. You do that. You do this. Basically, you go through life. You play the game. You check the boxes. There's a script. And you play this script. And the way that you succeed in America is by successfully following the script, not by deviating from the script. Because, if you even just, go to State U, for example, maybe you're going to think that's going to be bad. And I think even entrepreneurship has become a script. Like so much of our entrepreneurial vision today is about what I call Silicon Valley tech. And it's like, oh, I want to start a company. Well, first I got to come up with a pitch deck, and I got to talk about my hockey stick and my 50x, returns and total addressable market. Then I go get an angel investment. Then I go to the seed round. Then I go to the Series A, then the Series B, and then maybe there's an IPO, or maybe there's an acqui-hire, or maybe there's a private. But it's like a script. You're running a script. There's like a script for building a tech company, and you're highly unrewarded. You're not rewarded if you're not building it. And so, one of the things on the script, for example, is people don't want to invest in capital-intensive businesses today. It's like, no, what you want to have is like a pure-play IP business that generates all these things. And so it's like, there's even certain types of companies that we're doing, and you really have to be a highly unusual person to even think about going off the script. I mean, starting something like Tesla or SpaceX, only somebody like Elon Musk really could have done that because he had made money in other things, and he's an audacious gambler. But it wasn't the sort of thing that businesses, there weren't a lot of venture capitalists looking to pour money into car companies. And so I think that became, of course, now that that's been successful, there's a lot of money flowing into space. But for a long time, there was no money flowing into space industries. So I think our society has created this sort of scripts. There's way too many scripts that the path to success has become about successfully following the script, which is highly education driven. It's education, meritocracy, check the boxes, don't deviate, don't do anything that's going to give them an excuse to reject you at the elite school, color between the lines, and I think that has a negative effect for sure.
Is there a way how do you instill that sense of the spirit of adventure into the students then in this world that you've just described?
It's very hard because we do live in a different era, I think. But I think some of it just goes back to our sort of child rearing practices. Even we think about, everybody talks about helicopter parenting. And, Jonathan Haidt, the NYU professor, he's got a great book out about social media and all these things. But basically, he's also part of the free range kids movement. When I was a kid in the 1980s and 70s, we could just go outside and play and go do things. And it's like, you got to be home by this time, and you can't go further than here from the house. And otherwise, you're just going out and doing things. And I lived in a rural area, but it wasn't like there's a group of kids that were organizing pickup sports or something like that. But you would just go play and you would go do things, and you were kind of free to kind of do a lot of things. Everybody today, the kids are hovering. The parents are hovering. There's no unsupervised time. And it's you could even, you hear all these stories, parents arrested because their 9-year-old is like walking down the street to school by themselves or something like that. And so we've gone from, it's totally crazy. Ben Sass, former U.S. Senator, wrote a book, I think it might be called The Vanishing American Adult. And I think he was talking about his dad. Like, again, it was another one of these Rich DeVos, Jay Van Andel stories. When he was in high school or something, he would just go off for in the summer, go off for several weeks by himself to an uninhabited island in Canada and go hunting and fishing with his buddies and things like that. You don't allow people to do that today. So I think the reality is people from a very earliest age are inculcated into an environment in which they're in a highly supervised, structured way of thinking. And that's not all bad. I don't think I would want my 14, my son's 8, he's 14, I don't think I want him driving a truck across the country by himself or whatever. So I'm part of the problem. I don't even think that, I'm not even willing to give my son the freedom that I had when I was a kid. So again, I think it's just in the air, but I think this, again, is another kind of way that we raise kids. Everything about them is don't go do interesting things that kind of are off the script. And if it were on the script, the marketplace, right, people, it's why it's very difficult to beat the market in investing, because if there were a good idea that it was obvious, it would make a lot of money, somebody else would have already done it. You kind of have to go off the script and find something a little bit contrarian. I love Michael Porter, the Harvard Business School professor's thing about strategy. The essence of strategy is about being different. You got to create a unique matrix of value for a company, or else you're just in a commodity market. And so I really feel like we train kids from an early age to, again, be conformist and to color between the lines. The whole script is about, here's the tedious resume building script that gets you to, success in life. And there's no room for people, there aren't we aren't valorizing the people or celebrating the stories of people who did it differently. And so I think there are so many different ways there's more ways to crazy success than we dream possible. And you're probably only going to be really successful in entrepreneurship if you're doing something different than what everybody else is doing.
You're exactly right. Maybe shifting gears a little bit. We're here in Grand Rapids. I call it the home of entrepreneurship in Michigan, and part of the reason why is we have events like this that are put together by the private sector. But for maybe the other side of that coin, you think of public-private sector partnerships. On the public sector side, for elected officials, how should they be thinking from a policy standpoint, creating a community where entrepreneurship can flourish? Is it staying out of the way? Is it finding those entrepreneurs and kind of lowering the barrier to entry into their geography? What's your advice, having kind of studied various cities that have had varying degrees of success in attracting entrepreneurs?
Yeah, again, regulation has metastasized in our country. Another kind of, I mentioned the way we raise kids, the meritocratic scripts. Another one has been our approach to building anything. It used to just be in America, you could build something. And, the reality is there were some legitimate problems. We sort of plowed freeways through the middle of urban neighborhoods without any concern. We did have a ton of pollution. So we said, well, we can't allow that to happen. So we got to have all these environmental rules and studies. So now you got to study everything to death before you can do anything. You got to have permits from 22 different agencies. And that's why it takes 8 to 10 years to implement a major transportation project. And it just gets worse and worse. When I started paying attention to transportation projects 15 or 20 years ago, there'd be a big interstate project. I would go get a copy of the environmental impact statement, and it was about this thick. It was a big, thick book, but I could sit there and read it. Now, the environmental impact statement might be 20,000 pages. I think it was the Bayonne Bridge, or that they raised? Is that the one they raised? Basically, they expanded the Panama Canal, and now bigger ships can go through the Panama Canal. And as part of that, the ports had to be upgraded. And in New York, they had to take one of the bridges from Staten Island to New Jersey and increase the clearance so that bigger ships could get under it. One of the ways they said, well, we can just jack the bridge up, make it higher. We're just going to raise the level of the bridge. We're not going to change a pier. We're not going to change anything else. We're just going to raise the existing bridge. And again, it was a 20,000-page environmental impact study. And then, people still stewed, and it didn't work. But it's just too hard to do anything in our country. Yeah. And so I think it's sort of we make it just too difficult. And I think we got to deal with this regulatory stuff, which is killing us. And that's why a lot of people, have been leaving some of these, coastal states where, a place like New York, they got so much money. There's really no substitute for New York. There are unique agglomeration effects in the finance industry and so much money. So they got so much gushers of money coming in there. And you can get away with a lot. And you have, so that you can be stupid. San Francisco can get away with being stupid because San Francisco is one of the most beautiful cities in the world. They have the tech industry. Grand Rapids can't get away with stupid. Indianapolis can't get away with stupid. We have to be, we can't just realize, when our main industry goes under, the federal government will just bail it out, which that's just not going to happen. So most places can't anticipate that. So I really think, the number one thing the government can do, I hate to sound like a trite libertarian talking point, but it really is, first do no harm.
Yeah. Maybe a slightly different question. Next year marks the 250th anniversary of the United States. I believe the 175th anniversary of Grand Rapids. I spent 20 years in New York City, and I worked in a neighborhood that was New Amsterdam. And New Amsterdam turned into this vibrant financial center and hub of entrepreneurship, which created New York City. And here I am 20 years later in a town that I would arguably call the Midwest New Amsterdam as well. Is there something about the kind of formation of these cities in the early days of these cities that has some sort of causal relationship or connection to an entrepreneurial hub?
Yeah, there's something, I think it's called the law of first effective settlement, which is to say the culture of the people who founded a place leave a sort of permanent stamp on the culture of the city. And so obviously, people, it's like, how real is it? But I think there's something there. You look at New York City, founded, it had this sort of Dutch trading culture. It was sort of outward thinking. It was globalist. It was very mercantile. It was very diverse. And so that continues to shape New York today in sort of its culture and the way that it thinks about people. There's an openness in New York. Chicago developed a very different approach. The best book, maybe, I don't know if it's the best book, one of the best books written about Chicago politics was called We Don't Want Nobody, Nobody Sent. And that's the mentality in Chicago. It's like, who sent you? Who do you know? It's all about a who do you know town. And, in New York, it's like, what can you do? Can you show your stuff? It's competitive, but there's an openness. And so I think that the culture of the city, and so again, I think Grand Rapids settled by a very different Dutch culture from a very different era, certainly has had an impact in terms of sort of maybe more a communitarian approach. You look at the area, also Northwest Iowa was very similar, very high social capital, higher functioning, higher philanthropic, I think more rootedness, et cetera. It's amazing to me that the people who made a bunch of money in Grand Rapids are still here. So the biggest, most important company in Indianapolis is Eli Lilly, the world's most valuable pharmaceutical company. And the Lilly family dominated the life of the city. Eli Lilly II was the most powerful man in town for decades and decades, and he died in 1977. There's not a single Lilly family member left in Indianapolis. And I can go through town after town after town and talk about incredible, patriarchs of their town, or just incredible civic-minded leaders, and you look like there's nobody left. Where they're all? They're all in Brooklyn. They're all in San Francisco. They're gone. They never come back. And, it's one thing to have homes here and there, but it's like, the idea that like, not just one person here, but like lots of people are still in Grand Rapids when they could be anywhere in the world. That says something, I think, about the culture of this city and its values and the attachment people have here that isn't there everywhere.
Yeah, and I think you nailed it right on the head. There's something special about this place. I think it's the reason why everybody in this room is here, wants to be here. They're long on this city, long on this state, but most importantly, long on the entrepreneurial spirit and adventurous spirit that exists here more than many places in this country. So a round of applause for Aaron Renn.